All right, let's talk about lesson plans and why lesson plans are so critical and how we put lesson plans together. So, a lesson plan is essentially exactly what it sounds like. It's just the plan that I have for therapy. What am I going to do in therapy with this particular client, whether that be early intervention all the way up to our geriatric population? It doesn't matter. We want to have some kind of a lesson plan together. So, as a younger clinician, you're going to want a more detailed lesson plan to help you so that you don't have this kind of panic mode in case things don't go the way you plan. And then as you kind of get more steeped into the field, you'll see that your lesson plans are a lot less detailed and you don't need as much information just because you've learned how to adapt very quickly. So we're going to talk about three different things. We're going to talk about individual lesson plans. This is going to be a one-on-one session. And then we're going to talk about group sessions. So what that would look like if I have a lot of different groups and even different goals in this group. And I'm going to show you some templates. And then in class, we're going to do an in-class activity where we're going to practice making some lesson plan templates so that you are prepared moving forward. So what does it look like to have an individual lesson plan? In a one-on-one therapy plan, what you're looking for at first are what are the goals? So you really need to know what are the goals that we're targeting in this therapy session. And on your lesson plan, your goals should always be to try to hit all of your goals if possible. But things happen and time happens, and you're not always going to be able to hit every single goal, every single session for whatever reason. But you need to know what the goals are. Knowing what your client likes is going to be really critical too. So this is really important because being able to formulate a lesson plan around something that your client likes will really help with that engagement. So if you're working with an adult and you know that this is a particular adult that loves to talk about their grandchildren, if you can create a lesson plan that hits their goals and allows them to talk about their grandchild, this is going to be massive buy-in from the client. And that's really, really going to help. And then you also want to think, can this be generalized? Or am I just creating a lesson plan that's only going to work in my four white walls in my therapy session and I'm never going to be able to generalize it? We want to make sure that any lesson that we're doing is really helping our client to be able to generalize those goals because we don't want them to be restricted just to the therapy room. And homework is always really important, especially this is going to be really important for our adult clients who are trying to get back to work or trying to basically kind of get back to their life before the incident maybe that they had. And so helping them to be able to practice these. And again, homework that they can buy into. As a pediatric clinician, I do have a lot of parents who ask me to give homework to their young children, and it becomes like your traditional homework like they would do at school. And so some kids do it, some kids don't. But again, if you're giving homework, make it really fun. So you want to make it look fun, you want it to look engaging, you want them to want to do this homework, but keep in mind that we're not doing homework all the time every single day, right? We need to live our lives and tell our clients that too. We're not bound by the SLP world. So you're going to make a lesson plan that looks at their goals, the client likes, can be generalized, and if you can send homework home, that would be great as well. So here's just an example, and I do want to point out that this is an AI generated example. So I just asked AI to help, and this is that magic school that I was telling everyone about, and I'll teach you how to use this in class. So for this particular client, I have a couple different goals. The irregular past tense verbs, so you can see that right here, irregular past tense verbs. Oops, I apologize. I also wanted some vocabulary growth and the subject verb agreement as well as topic maintenance. So this particular kid is, and this is a child, this one is for a kiddo. And so for this particular kid, we have a lot going on. So we're going to have, the plan is to have this one-on-one conversation with the SLP where we're going to briefly describe a story about SpongeBob or Cars. So right away you can tell that this particular client likes SpongeBob and they like Cars. So if I want my child to be talking to me and I want them to engage in a conversation with me, it better be about a topic that they like. And this is why I've mentioned in the past, I have learned how to play Minecraft. I once watched multiple episodes of Duck Dynasty just so that I could be able to have a conversation with my client because I had a client who was obsessed with this show. So it was really important that you know that I knew these things, and it's really important that you know these things. So if you have a client who is a science teacher who's trying to get back into teaching, you need to learn some aspects of what they're teaching so you can have these conversations. Or on the flip side, you could have them teach you these concepts so that they're practicing those skills. Really great lesson plan right there. Have them say, you're the teacher. Remember, I don't know anything, but of course you would need to know some information in case they're not giving proper information. You could have them label parts of a microscope or have them talk about various chemicals that they might be teaching in class, whatever it might be. So for this kid though, they like SpongeBob, they like cars. We're going to talk about an episode and we're going to make sure that they're using that past tense, they're using bigger vocabulary, subject verb agreement, and topic maintenance. So every single goal can be hit here. And so what we're talking about here is you're going to say, what is your favorite episode of SpongeBob or Cars and why? And so that's when we're really going to start working with the child about getting into the why to expand that language. You can even show a short clip to really engage or stimulate the discussion, and then have them talk about that using very specific grammar or very specific vocabulary. So moving on, you want to list any materials you would need. And then what you'll do here, this guided practice, or what we would call this also is a teaching time. Teaching time would be a time when you are modeling a conversation, you are showing them what you expect, and teaching time should always come first. So remember, during teaching time, we're not collecting data. We have to have a very specific time during therapy that we are teaching our client what we expect. If the client didn't need us to have that explicit teaching time, they wouldn't be coming to see us because they would be picking up on these skills in the natural environment. So please, please, please never neglect your teaching time. And you have to have that very specific teaching time before each one of the goals, and make sure that the client knows this is the goal that we're targeting, right? And I'm only going to be looking at one goal at a time, and I'm front loading my client. So we might tell a story about SpongeBob, and this time I'm going to look for subject verb agreement. So I'll model subject verb agreement. We'll talk about subject verb agreement. I'll maybe give them a visual, whatever they need. And then I'll say, okay, let's talk about SpongeBob. Then in the next one, we might be looking at expanding our vocabulary. So I will give my kid an example. Here's how we use different words. Here's how we're going to expand our vocabulary. Here are some extra words that we can use. Teaching time, and then go and collect your data, and so forth and so on with all of that. But always front loading, always having the teaching time first, and you can put that right into your lesson plan. Then you want them to do that independent practice after, and you can give them a worksheet. I'm not a fan of worksheets. Again, this is AI generated, so they said, hey, have some worksheets. I'm not a super fan of worksheets just because kids find those to be very, very boring, but you can use it during your teaching time. So maybe instead of independent practice, you could have some worksheets during teaching time, or you could let them practice independently before they start to tell the story. And then closing up, we can talk about, again, it's always nice to wrap up a session saying like, what did I learn and how can we reinforce what happened during the session. And then you always want to have extra activities, especially as a young clinician when you're first learning. Having extra activities really helps for if a client really hates the activity that you bring forth. Like that can be really, really terrifying if a client just says to you, no, I don't want to do this, and they just straight up refuse. And kids do that. And adults do this. This is not restricted just to children. You will have adults who will refuse to do your activities. So you always want to have something else kind of in your back pocket to say, okay, that's fine. Here's the extra activity that we're doing. Another reason you want to have extra activities is because if the client gets through the activity faster than you anticipate, you don't want to be sitting there being like, oh, we still have 20 minutes left of this session and I don't have anything else for you to do. So just having an extra activity or two is always a really good idea. And then here's just an example of some homework that you could send home with the child as well. Here is how it might look like as a template. So you would have all of the information up here, again, of your client. This is my first goal. This is my second goal. What's the activity I'm going to have? What are the materials I'm going to need? So let's talk about targets and let's talk about step ups and step downs and why they're important to have in your lesson plan. So your goal is going to be, what is the overarching goal? Okay, so I want this kid to be able to independently use subject verb agreement in a short story that lasts at least 3 minutes, whatever, by a certain date, whatever your goal might be. That's your goal. However, when we first start working with a client, that might not be where we're at initially. So where we are at initially, or where we will be in this particular session, is going to be called your target, right? And you don't have to stick to these terms. These are just terms that to kind of help us think about what we're doing in therapy. So the goal is, where do we expect them to be when they're finished with this goal? versus the target is what are we going to do this week in therapy? So this week in therapy, we might do subject verb agreement given a static visual prompt in a story that lasts for 1 minute. See how it's a little bit reduced versus independent, 3 minutes, however big your goal might be. And usually we create goals anywhere between 6 months to a year out. That's going to be your goal. But the target for this week is that we are either we're going to reduce it down, give them extra support, or we're going to give them less support than what we did before. So whatever you plan on doing this week in therapy, that's going to be your target. Then we have step ups and step downs. So let's say we have a target that says we're going to give them a static visual. Well, how would we give them more support? So let's say we're giving that static visual, we're looking at our data as we're collecting data, and we're like, wow, this is really not working. They really need more support. So you want to have already on your lesson plan and already in your brain, how could I step this down to really help them more? So your stepping down is basically saying, what is the next level of support that I could give them because this static visual is not enough. So maybe we give them a static visual and a gestural prompt, or we give them a static visual and minimal verbal prompting, but it's extra support than what we had planned to give them. And the reason why I really encourage you to write this down is so that you don't have to think about this on the fly right in the middle of a session. Again, once you are a more experienced clinician, once you get into the field more, you can think of this stuff like, oh, I've got this, I know what to do. But as a young clinician, again, this could be really scary if you get in there and you're like, oh my gosh, this isn't working. What do I do? Well, you have a plan. You have a plan already. If it's not working, no problem. I've got you, Bob, or I've got you, whoever is in your session with you, right? Like, I've got you. I can give you more support. I've already got it written down. I've got this plan all settled out. I'm going to give you more support this way. But let's say Bob doesn't need that much support, and let's say you're seeing that static visual is actually way too much support and they're getting it every single time. And you know this by looking at your data. And we'll talk about this during the data session, but you know this by looking at data. So now we want to give Bob a step up. So we're saying that static visual, he's getting it every single time. This is way too much support for my client. So a step up could maybe be a transient visual. So I'm going to take that visual away, and I'm only going to show it to you when you need it, and then I'm going to take it away again. That would be a step up. So that could be an example of a step up. So giving less support is a step up. Giving more support is a step down. So being able to say, hey, this is what we're doing. I hope that this helps, but I want to have a plan just in case they need more support. I want to have a plan in case they need less support. And then you're going to do this for every goal that the client has. What's the activity? What are the materials? How will you step up and step down? And what's the target for this week? And the activity and the materials could be the same. So like the SpongeBob storytelling, that could be the same activity and the same materials, but how are you targeting this goal in this activity? Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. We're going to practice templates in class. Okay, but many of you are going to have group therapy. You're probably already experiencing this, and group therapy is quite a bit different-ish. Okay, so group therapy is not. This is really, really critical. Group therapy is not individual therapy in a group setting. So we're not saying Sally gets therapy, then John gets therapy, then Anaya gets therapy, and then Ralph gets therapy, and then I'm going to go back to Bob or whoever the first kid is that I said, right? And then everybody else just sits there and waits while we work on the goals of that particular client. That is not group therapy. That is individual therapy in a group setting. So not the same at all. So we want to make sure that we're actually doing group therapy where everybody's working together and everybody's doing therapy. So the best strategy for this is that you pick an activity that the entire group or most of the group would enjoy doing, and then you fit the goals into the activity. If you are trying to find an activity that every single goal fits into, you are going to drive yourself crazy because it's not going to work. So what you want to do is you want to think of something like, we're going to do progressive storytelling. And if you don't know what that is, that's okay. I'm going to teach you about it. That's just an example for now. We're going to do progressive storytelling, and how do I fit everybody's progressive storytelling everybody's goals into progressive storytelling? And I promise you, you can get so creative. You can come up with almost any activity. and we can brainstorm and you will come up with some way to fit everybody's goals into that one activity. It definitely works. So some key concepts that you really want to think about is that everybody should be doing something at all times, not sitting there, not coloring, not picking their nose, looking off in another direction. Your adults especially are going to get really, really bored really fast if you don't give them something to do, right? So you have to give them something to do that makes them an active participant into the group. And with littles, if you don't give them something to do, they're just going to run away from the table or crawl under the table. So lots of unwanted behaviors are going to happen both from children and adults if you're not giving people something to do. Breaks are still essential. So having a group break is still going to be essential because, again, everybody's doing something at all times. And it's okay if a different student, I should have said, or client, I apologize here. It's okay if a different client practices the goal of another client or student. That's okay. It's all right if, let's say, not everybody's working on their sound, but we have everybody practice their sound. That's okay. If not everybody's working on vocabulary growth, it does not hurt for everyone to work on vocabulary growth together, even if that's not your goal. But you want to make sure that the objectives are very, very clear to everyone. So again, really could not emphasize the front loading enough. Front loading is critical in therapy. Letting your clients know, what am I expecting of you? They don't have your lesson plan. They can't read your brain. If you don't tell them what goal you're working on, they do not know what you're looking for, and they are not going to be able to get this goal. And your data is going to be frustrating, and you're going to be frustrated, and they're going to be frustrated because you're going to be prompting them to get the right thing, but they don't even know what they're being prompted for. So just make sure that your objectives are super clear. And then of course, in a group, you always have to be flexible and adaptable because you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to go right. And this is again why we always have extra plans and extra activities in our back pocket. And you know what? If you don't use them in this session, you use them for the next session. So it's not wasted. It's just your lesson plan for next week if you don't use it this particular week. So here again, I forgot to put it, but this is an AI generated. This should be an AI generated. I apologize for forgetting to put the reference here. But in a group session, in this particular one, I wanted to talk about adults, and we're going to think about self-advocacy. Here are our goals. We have some self-advocacy, effective communication strategies, and professional interactions. These are very common for our adult clients, especially those who are trying to get back to work. And I apologize again, this shouldn't say students, this should say client. But the client is going to I apologize. This is student because this is you. So you are going to create a lesson plan that looks at all of these things. So how do we self-advocate? What are our communication strategies, and what are our professional interactions? So things such as emailing, returning phone calls, clarity and engagement in conversations with people. That's your plan. So this is the assessment. We're going to assess our student, or you're going to assess yourself. Does my lesson plan involve all of these things? So we can open and talk about the importance of communication. And again, you're opening, you're front loading. We're talking about what are some challenges that you're facing right now in work. And then we can even have this little icebreaker where you can share some of your favorite times and then have your client share some of theirs. So what you'll see, I bet you can guess, when I generated this in AI, I told AI that our clients really like pickleball. So there's a lot of people who are way into pickleball right now. And so I said, hey, here are my clients. Here are their goals. They really also like pickleball. So we want to get them talking. Again, that buy-in, the engagement. Let's talk about some pickleball. Let's just have kind of a relaxed conversation to kind of practice these communication strategies and clarity if we have a communication breakdown, or even just self-advocating. So one of the things that we do a lot with our aphasic patients is to get them just to say, I have aphasia, be patient with me, right? That's important because if their language is slow or if their speech has some misarticulations, we want them to be able to self-advocate. So you kind of have this icebreaker to break them into the conversation. Again, AI generated, I apologize for forgetting to put that on here. We can talk about the materials that we need. We can ask them to role play if that's something you think they would be into. But as a group, they can have these conversations with each other. They can be sharing about their hobbies and their interests, While another group member could be asking for clarity, or another group member could be working on retaining that information and being able to continue the conversation. So everybody has to listen while someone else is talking, because it's going to be their turn to have a conversation next. And if we disengage from the conversation, like we said back here, that would be non-effective communication strategies. And this is a goal that we're working on. We want our clients to be engaged in conversation. So here, everyone has to be engaged. Everyone is sharing about their hobbies. Can we ask questions about those hobbies? Can a client self-advocate in a group setting to say, I'm getting fatigue, I would like someone else to take a break now? That's really good self-advocacy. That's really important. That's a really important skill for our clients to have when they go back to work, right? So saying like, hey, I need to take a break, I need to take a nap, I need to take a walk, whatever it might be, because my brain is fatigued. And so that could be something they could practice in a group setting, and everybody respecting those boundaries, and maybe even giving them some support of like, oh yeah, I've been there, or hey, you know what? I need a break too. Oh, okay. Everybody just self-advocated for a break. Let's just take a break. We can sit in silence. You can talk about whatever you want. You can do whatever you want, right? It's break time. And keep in mind, during break times, adults and children, you never, ever, 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 ever ask them to do anything during break time. You leave them alone. And in some cases, you don't even talk to them. There are some kids who during their break time, they just want to play silently in the corner. There are some adults during break time, they just want to sit in silence. You do whatever your client wants to do. We're not prompting. We're not asking questions. We are not doing therapy. We are taking a break. So just please make sure that we're honoring that break time. So again, that guided practice, which this is where we're really helping them. We're showing them how to do things. We're giving them a script for answering phone calls. We're helping them with emails. We're giving them scripts for self-advocacy, like my brain is fatigued, I need a break, or I have aphasia, could you be patient with me? We could give them templates for emails, and you could practice helping them. So this could be your guided practice. So where we're helping, and then scaffolding, so that step up and step down, helping where necessary. Do they need more help today or less help today? Now, our aphasic clients and even our TBI clients, we do want to keep in mind that the support that we give them is not always going to be the same from week to week. So you really have to think and pay attention. What is the support they need this week? And that could be completely different than what they're going to need next week. So we really want to make sure that we're able to be really flexible in the type of support that we're giving them. And then during your practice, during your session, you want to give them time to practice on their own. So let them write an email. So everybody's going to practice writing an email, and then they can switch with a partner and have them read the emails. Ask questions, again, asking clarity, communication strategies, self-advocating. So if a client is really struggling, can they help ask someone else? Not necessarily you, but maybe someone else in the group. Like, can you help me to write this? How would this come across to you if I said it this way? Is it rude? Does it make sense? Is it clear? And again, being very, very specific. So we're going to collaborate together with their colleagues, with their peers in the room. They're seeking feedback. They're doing revisions, talking to each other, not just to you. Because remember, the point of this session is to get our adults back to their lives before. You were not part of their lives before. So we want them to have their peers to be able to talk to be able to give them that feedback. And then we talk about kind of each adult is going to share strategies that they're going to learn, what's going to work most effective for them. And then you give them some assignments. You could have a reflective journal or have them pick a strategy that worked best that day in session. And like, okay, I want you to use this particular strategy. And if you remember, write it down. You'll come back and you'll share. Did it work? Did it not work? If it didn't work, why didn't it work? And how do we adapt it to help you, or get feedback from the colleagues in the group on saying like, okay, I didn't self-advocate this week, and the reason why is because I got really nervous. Well, what's really great is that someone else in the group is also going to have that same experience where they say, oh yeah, you know, I went to Starbucks and they gave me Splenda instead of sugar, and I just, you know what, I had brain fatigue that day and I just took the Splenda. And sometimes you just accept that. Now, we want to really encourage our clients to never just accept things like that, because that is really taking away their voice. And so that's where kind of that counseling piece is going to come in. But of course, we also want them to have self-advocacy, self-sufficiency, and autonomy. So if they choose, like, you know what, it's not worth the fight today, because all of us have been there. We've been at Starbucks, they got our drink wrong, and we're like, you know what, it is what it is. This is good enough. I'm just going to deal with that. So we never condone them for that, but we do want to say, like, hey, next time, what would help you feel more secure? How could I support you in feeling more secure? But you know what? Again, reassuring them, everybody's been there. It's okay. What can we do moving forward? So hopefully that helps with group sessions. And again, I'm happy to sit down with anybody at any time and talk about group sessions. But let's look at a few templates. So this template is kind of wild. I'm not going to lie. I have the resource down here where I got this template from. I'll let you kind of just go through this. But this is a pretty massive template where this particular SLP has a lot of different skills. So I'm going to assume these are all the skills that this particular SLP works on in therapy. But they're saying, okay, for this student, for their therapy, what's this student's goals? What are the goals? So activities of the week are, like, so what are the activities? So this particular person, here's the whole week laid out. So I'm going to check off what are the skills we're working on? What are all the activities that I could use? And then you'll see this is all the same list underneath. But what are some materials? So I need some academic work, or I need a text or a reading passage. If you have an AAC client, you better have their AAC. And then what visual cues might I need for this client? So this is really important too. If you're doing a static or a transient visual, it is really critical that you have that visual ready to go before therapy, that you're not making it as you're sitting in there, that you already know what is the visual that we're using, and you probably are going to be using the same visual from week to week. You should be using the same visual from week to week. So that's just something to keep in mind. So this one's really detailed, but it's just a checkbox. Probably was a lot of work up front. But then moving in, this also could be really, or moving forward, this could be helpful. So here, we do sometimes do observations, and or is it a data collection session? So we're being able to say this is what we're doing. But this is a pretty in-depth template for a lesson plan, but there's one option. Here's another one if you want to have a themed lesson. So let's say you have some adults, and February is Black History Month. So we're coming up on February, coming up on Black History Month. And for this particular session, when I'm giving this lecture right now, February is very soon. And so if you had a group that was really interested in really celebrating that and talking about that, what are some books that we could look at? And again, if for an adult, it wouldn't necessarily be a craft. Maybe it would be an article that you could look at, or something that you could read together. And so looking at what is the activity where we could do, where maybe we have one client who's working on articulation, we have another client that's working on language, and one client who's working on social skills, and everybody could incorporate those skills into this particular book or this particular theme. So everybody might share personal experiences or something that they've learned or something that they hope to learn. So that would be a theme that you could use, and see, you could have different books for each week or different articles. So it doesn't have to be books. You could do a website, you could do a blog post, or even a podcast if you wanted your clients to listen to a podcast. So these terms are not completely locked in. This is just an example of what could we be working on. For an individual session, if you have a client working on all of these things together, that could be okay too, where we have some articulation going on, plus some language, plus some social. I'm going to write down what are the things that we're working on in this particular activity, in this particular book, blog, so forth and so on. This one is kind of like a cutesy one. So let's say you're working in a preschool setting, and for this particular week or month, and you could do a month. So again, we're coming up on February at the time that I'm giving this particular lecture. So if you want to do Sneezy the Snowman, and you could introduce Sneezy, and you're going to write out something about Sneezy, and you're going to draw a picture, and that could be their break time. Let's draw a picture of Sneezy, and my snowman melted because, or my snowman won't melt because. And we can read a book, come up with a story, and have the child think about who was the main character, what was the setting, what was the problem, and what was the solution. So if we're looking at sequencing, right, that could be a goal that we're working on. even if you're not working on sequencing, let's just say you're working on details of a story or topic maintenance or even articulation, you've got your S-blends here for articulation. So again, it doesn't have to be that the goal is S-blends articulation, but you are working on S-blends intentionally or unintentionally. You are working on sequencing intentionally or unintentionally, and that's okay. And also giving the child these worksheets to kind of take a break where you can say, hey, let's just color, let's just draw a picture. We're going to take a quick break from what we're doing. So this is just an example of another lesson plan. All right, so I want you to think about what questions you have. So when you come to class, what we are going to do is we are going to work on making lesson plan templates. And then as we get into each one of our sessions, speech, phonology, articulation, phonology, spoken language, written language, and so forth and so on, how do we make a lesson plan specifically around that particular area? So let me know what questions you have. I hope this helped, and I will see you all soon.